Every time you say too much, you lose a piece of yourself. Sounds dramatic, right? But think about it. How many times have you trusted someone and regretted it? How many times have you spoken from your wounds, hoping for understanding, and instead received judgment? Not everyone deserves to know who you are on the inside. Because in a world that feeds on gossip, drama, and other people's weakness, silence isn't cowardice, it's strategy. And today, you're going to learn how to use it. This video is a guide to personal protection based on Stoic wisdom. I'm going to teach you the 12 things you should never tell anyone if you want to live with peace, strength, and real mental clarity. Because yes, speaking can be liberating, but it can also trap you. The Stoics knew that not everything should be shared. Not your plans, not your wounds, not your deepest ambitions. Some secrets aren't a burden, they're an anchor. And today you'll understand why staying quiet isn't always repression. Sometimes it's freedom. If you apply what you're about to learn, you'll stop handing your power to people who don't know how to value it. And you'll start living with more intention, more protection, and more truth. But tell me this, how many more times are you going to expose yourself just because you don't know how to say less? If that question makes you uncomfortable, maybe it's time to change. Subscribe and become an exclusive member to learn how to keep to yourself what's truly worth gold. And tell me in the comments, what part of yourself have you shared with the wrong person? Or just write, "My silence is power too." Ready to rebuild your boundaries through Stoic wisdom? Then listen closely, because this starts now. Lesson 1. Your insecurities and self-contempt are fuel for those who don't wish you well. Listen to this carefully because most people learn it too late. Some spend years wondering why they're always treated badly, why no one respects them, why it feels like the world is against them. And if you watch them for a week, it all makes sense. It's not the world, it's them. Because every time they open their mouth to talk about themselves, they do it to tear themselves apart. I'm useless at this. I always mess everything up. There's no hope for me. And they say it like it's nothing, like it's just normal conversation, without realizing that every single one of those sentences is a direct instruction to the world on how to treat them. Here's something you should never tell anyone: your insecurities and that self-hate you carry around. Because when you voice all those negative thoughts you have about yourself, you're not being humble. You're not being realistic, you're handing out ammunition. You're giving people a manual on exactly how to attack you when they need to. You're highlighting your weak spots with neon lights. Your words act like a map. When you label yourself as clumsy, incapable, lost, or a failure, people take note. They file that information away, and some, the ones who don't want the best for you, will use it. Maybe not right away, maybe not this week. But when the time comes, when there's conflict, when they need to put you down, they'll pull out the exact words you gave them. Well, you're the one who said you're terrible at this. I'm not surprised, coming from someone who always admits they can't handle anything. See what just happened? They used your own words against you. And the worst part is, even you can't defend yourself. Because you said it first. You made it valid. You gave them permission. You turned your self-hate into shared truth. Let me paint a scene that happens all the time. You're in a work meeting. A project didn't go well. Someone starts looking for who's to blame. Several people were involved, but suddenly all eyes are on you. Why? Because for months you've been saying, "I'm terrible with deadlines. I always get disorganized with this stuff. I don't even know why they trust me with big projects." You thought you were being funny. You thought you were being modest, but what you were really doing was building your own gallows. And now that something went wrong, guess who's the perfect scapegoat? You. Because you told them yourself that you're the weakest link. The human brain has a brutal capacity to turn repetition into reality. It doesn't distinguish between truth and fiction when something is repeated enough. If you spend years saying, and saying to others, that you're a failure, your brain will eventually accept that as your identity. And once it becomes your identity, you act from that place. You make decisions from there. You relate to others from there. You become the prophecy you created. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that should be tattooed on everyone. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. But there's something crucial to add. It also becomes dyed with the color of the words you speak about yourself. Every negative phrase is like programming a line of code into your operating system. And over time, that code runs by itself. You wake up feeling incapable because for months you've been describing yourself that way. You react from a place of defeat because that's the story you've reinforced over and over. The Stoics understood this with a clarity we've lost. Epictetus, who spent much of his life enslaved, knew what it meant to have no control over anything. But there was one thing no one could take from him: the way he thought and spoke about himself. That's why he insisted on guarding your inner dialogue like it's the most precious thing you own. He said that if someone speaks badly of you, and it's true, fix yourself. If it's false, ignore it. But the modern problem is that the person who speaks the worst about you is yourself. And you can't ignore that, because it comes from within. Let's be brutally honest. When you share your self-contempt, when you speak your insecurities out loud, you're doing several devastating things all at once. You're weakening your position in any group. You're giving people reasons not to trust you. You're planting doubt where none existed before. And you're inviting people to treat you exactly how you treat yourself, with contempt. Because here's something most people don't get. People don't treat you how you deserve. They treat you how you show them to treat you. If you speak badly about yourself, if you constantly put yourself down, why would you expect others to treat you better? You've set the standard. You've said, "This is how I see myself. Feel free to see me the same way." There's a devastating psychological phenomenon here. When you constantly belittle yourself in front of others, even the people who initially respected you start to shift how they see you. Not because they're bad people, because the human brain seeks consistency. If you keep calling yourself incompetent, their brain starts scanning for evidence to confirm that. They start noticing your mistakes more. They downplay your wins. They begin to see you exactly how you present yourself. Then there's the impact on intimate relationships, your partner, your close friends. This is where self-contempt does the deepest damage. When you constantly share your insecurities with someone close, when you always put yourself down around them, you're placing an impossible burden on that relationship. At first, they might comfort you. Don't say that. You're better than you think. Don't be so hard on yourself. But after months, after years of hearing that same broken record of self-hate, something shifts. The exhaustion kicks in. Patience runs out. And eventually, they either start believing your negative narrative, or they walk away. Because it's exhausting trying to constantly convince someone of their worth when that person is committed to denying it. I've seen solid relationships fall apart because of this. One person with so much spoken self-hate that eventually their partner gave up. Not because they stopped loving them, because it's impossible to keep loving someone who hates themselves that much. Because every compliment was rejected, every gesture of love was dismissed, every effort to build self-esteem was sabotaged with, "Yeah, but you don't really know me. I'm worse than you think." That's exhausting. And no one, no matter how much they love you, can carry that weight forever. So what do you do when you feel those insecurities? When the self-loathing is real, pulsing in your chest? I'm not saying it doesn't exist, I'm saying don't share it indiscriminately. Don't use it as social currency. Don't make it your introduction to the world. There's a massive difference between processing your insecurities internally, or with the right professional, and broadcasting them in every conversation. One thing is telling a therapist, "I'm struggling with self-doubt in my career and I need help." A very different thing is telling every colleague, every friend, every acquaintance, "I'm a failure at everything I do." The first one seeks solutions. The second one seeks validation for your own negativity. And there's a part of you, hard as it is to admit, that wants to be contradicted. That wants to hear, "No, you're not like that." Because you've become addicted to that cycle. You say something awful about yourself, someone comforts you, and for a moment you feel better. Until you need the fix again, and the cycle repeats. But that cycle is poison. Because you're training people to see you as someone who constantly needs validation, as someone emotionally unstable, as someone whose self-perception is so broken, you can't even be trusted to assess your own value. And here's something people don't think about. When you constantly speak badly about yourself, you're also affecting how others see you professionally. Imagine you're choosing between two people for an important project. Both are equally skilled, but one keeps saying, "I hope I don't mess this up. I always screw these things up. I don't even know why they picked me." Who would you choose? Exactly, the other one. Because even if the first one might be capable, she's already told you not to trust her. Your spoken self-hate doesn't make you humble. It makes you invisible. It makes you replaceable. It makes people doubt you before even giving you a chance. Seneca wrote something powerful. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. But we need to add, we hurt ourselves more with our own words than anyone else's. Because when someone else criticizes you, you can push back. You can ignore them. You can decide they're wrong. But when you criticize yourself out loud, there's no defense. You've confirmed the attack. You made it official. And there's the issue of collective memory. People don't remember everything you say, but they remember patterns. If the pattern is you always tearing yourself down, that's the summary they keep. Oh, right, so-and-so. The one who's always saying they're no good at anything. And that summary sticks. It clings. And it follows you. I've met brilliant, genuinely talented people who destroyed their professional reputation because they couldn't stop tearing themselves down in public. Every achievement, they minimized. Every success, they chalked up to luck. Every skill, they denied. And eventually, people believed them. If he says he's not good, it must be true. And the opportunities stopped coming. So if you have insecurities, if you carry self-hate, keep it to yourself. Work through it. With a professional, if you need to. With a journal, if that helps, but don't make it your brand. Don't use it as a way to connect with others. Don't assume that being vulnerable means saying every negative thing you think about yourself out loud. There's a way to be honest about your limitations without tearing yourself to pieces in public. You can say, "This isn't my area of expertise," instead of, "I'm useless at this." You can admit, "I made a mistake here," without saying, "I always ruin everything." You can acknowledge, "I need to improve in this," without declaring, "I'll never be good at anything." See the difference? One speaks about specific facts. The other attacks your entire identity. One preserves your dignity. The other destroys it. One invites growth. The other invites people to write you off. Your insecurities and your self-hate are absolutely things you should never share with anyone. Keep them. Work through them, heal them if you can, but don't make them your personal slogan. The world is already tough enough. Don't hand it the weapons to use against you. Lesson 2. Your plans under construction are fragile. Protect them from the noise. Let me tell you a story to help you understand why you shouldn't share your plans. In a small town, there lived a carpenter, not in the center where everyone could see him, on the outskirts. His workshop was at the back of his property, hidden from curious eyes. People in town knew he worked because sometimes, when the wind blew just right, you could hear the sound of the saw biting into wood, the rhythmic pounding of the hammer, the scraping of sandpaper. But no one knew exactly what he was building in there. The neighbors were curious, naturally. They constantly asked him, "What are you working on now? When will we get to see what you're making? Why all the secrecy?" Some even dropped by with obvious excuses just to try and peek into his workshop. But he always gave the same answer, with a patient but firm smile. "You'll see it when it's ready." Nothing more. He never explained, never justified. He just went back to his shop and closed the door. Years went by like that. The carpenter would enter each morning at sunrise and leave at dusk, in winter and summer, rain or shine. Sometimes a piece took him 3 months to finish, other times 6. Once he went a whole year without showing anything. But never, not even once, did he reveal a half-finished work. He never asked for opinions on sketches, never sought validation during the process. He just worked, in silence, with his hands, his wood, and his vision. When he died, already an old man, his family had to clear out the workshop, and what they found left them speechless. Dozens of extraordinary pieces, tables carved with such precise detail they looked like they'd been made by something more than human hands. Chairs with perfect ergonomics, as if he'd studied the human body for decades. Sculptures that captured movement in static wood, life in inert matter. Pieces that spoke, that told stories, that stirred emotion. And no one, absolutely no one, had seen any of it before. All that genius had bloomed in secret, and only once it couldn't be altered, questioned, or contaminated did it come to light. That story contains a truth that almost no one understands today. Your plans, while they're still being built, are one of the things you should never share with anyone. Not because they're some shameful secret, but because they're fragile, because they're in process, because they need protection. From noise, from opinions, from other people's doubts that can kill your vision before it even has a chance to take shape. We live in a time obsessed with transparency, where documenting the journey has become more important than the destination, where people share every idea, every intention, every plan from minute one. And they do it thinking they're being authentic, that they're sharing the journey. But what they're really doing is exposing something delicate to a hostile environment. Here's the core problem. When you share your plans too soon, you open several doors that should stay closed during the building phase. The first door is unsolicited opinions. The moment you say you're planning something, that you want to do something, that you have an idea, people feel an almost compulsive need to weigh in. Not because they're bad people, it's human nature. And their opinions come from their own filters, their own fears, their own limitations, not from your vision. Let me give you a very specific example. You decide you want to change careers. You've been thinking about it for months. You've looked at your options. You've assessed the risks. You've done your homework. But the idea is still forming. You're still shaping the full plan. Then at a family dinner, you mention it. I'm thinking of quitting my job and going back to study to become a therapist. Immediately, the flood begins. Your uncle, who's never changed jobs in his life, tells you it's too risky. Your cousin, who failed at running a business, projects his fear and says the economy's too unstable. Your mom, who loves you but still sees you as a kid, tells you to stay where it's safe. Your brother asks if you've thought about losing income, about years of study, about the competition in the market. And you leave that dinner with your original clarity completely polluted. All those opinions, even if well-intentioned, are now in your head, planting doubts that didn't exist before, creating mental roadblocks you hadn't seen. And the worst part? None of those people have the full context. None of them truly understand your vision, but their words carry weight because they're people you know, people you care about. If you had kept the plan to yourself, if you had waited until you had more clarity, until you had taken concrete steps, until you were more sure of your direction, those opinions wouldn't have had the chance to contaminate you. The second door you open is constant judgment. When people know you're working on something, they start to ask, "How's that project going? Have you made progress? When are you going to launch it?" And each question, even if it comes from genuine curiosity, is pressure. It's expectation. It's a reminder that now there are witnesses to your process. And that changes everything. Because now you're not just working for yourself. You're working not to disappoint those who know. Not to look like someone who just talks and never does. To be able to give a good answer when they ask. And that external pressure distorts your process. It makes you rush things that need time. It makes you show work before it's ready. It makes you make decisions based on what you'll say when people ask, instead of what's actually best for the project. The third door is premature validation, and this one is especially dangerous. When you share your plan, people react. Some get excited. "Great idea. You should go for it. I support you." And those words feel good, really good. So good that your brain releases dopamine. You feel validated, recognized, as if you've already accomplished something. But you haven't done anything, you've only spoken, and that hit of early validation lowers your actual drive to do the work, because you already got the emotional reward. You already felt the recognition, so why push yourself now to do the hard part? Your brain already feels satisfied. There's solid psychological research behind this. Peter Gallwitzer studied this phenomenon for years, the habit of sharing goals. He found that when people announce their plans publicly, they experience what he called social reality. Their minds feel like they've already made progress just by talking about the goal, and that false sense of progress reduces the motivation for real effort. In his experiments, he split people into two groups, both working toward the same goal. One group had to share their plans publicly, the other had to keep them private. Consistently, the group that kept their plans private worked more hours, showed more persistence, and made more measurable progress. The group that shared their goals got that premature high, and it sabotaged their actual effort. The fourth door is misunderstood public commitment. Many people share their plans thinking it will keep them accountable, that if they say it out loud, they'll feel forced to follow through. And in very specific cases, with the right people, that can work. But in most situations, what it creates isn't healthy commitment, it's toxic pressure. Because now you're doing something not because you genuinely want to, but because you said you would. Your motivation becomes external, based on not looking bad. And that kind of motivation is weak. It crumbles the moment things get hard, the moment real obstacles appear. Epictetus understood this 2,000 years ago. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Don't announce what you're going to become, be it. Don't proclaim your intentions. Show them with action, because words are cheap. The work is what counts. And when you work in silence, when you build without announcing, you're operating from pure motivation, unpolluted by other people's expectations. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, with access to the greatest minds of his time, could have declared every virtue he was trying to cultivate. He could have made his personal growth a public show, but his writings were private, just for him. He worked on his character in private, and the result was one of the most influential philosophies in human history. Born in silence, protected from noise. So when you have a plan, when an idea starts forming, when a vision begins to crystallize, keep it to yourself. Protect it. Give it time to grow roots in the dark before exposing it to the light. Like a seed. If you dig it up every day to check if it's growing, you kill it. It needs that time underground, invisible, safe. That doesn't mean you never share. It means you share wisely, at the right moment, with the right people. When the plan has enough weight to withstand scrutiny. When you've moved far enough forward that outside opinions won't knock you off course. Your plans under construction are fragile. They're yours, and they deserve the protection of silence until they're ready to stand on their own. That's one of the things you should definitely never tell anyone. What you're building before it's strong enough to survive the world. Lesson 3. What you're going to do kills your credibility before you even start. You know that guy. He's in your circle of friends, or in your family, or at your job. He's the one who always has a big plan just around the corner. Every time you see him, there's a new project on the way. I'm going to start working out. I'm going to learn German. I'm going to write that book. I'm launching a podcast. I'm moving abroad. And he says it with that bright look in his eyes, with that contagious energy that, for a second, makes you believe that maybe this time, yeah, this time he means it. But if you've known this person long enough, you don't believe it anymore. Because you've seen this movie before. 10 times, 20, and it always ends the same way, with the gym abandoned after week 2, with the German course dropped at lesson 3, with the book that never made it past chapter 1, with the podcast stuck at still researching microphones, with the big move that vanished the moment paperwork was involved. And the sad part isn't that he didn't do it. The sad part is that each failed announcement slowly erodes something precious, his credibility. First with others, eventually with himself. because it gets to a point where even he doesn't believe his own words. Deep down, he knows he's lying when he talks about the next big thing. The act of promising has become a substitute for the act of doing. This is one of those things you should never tell anyone. What you're going to do, your future intentions, your promises to change. Because every time you do it, every time you speak a plan before taking action, you're playing Russian roulette with your reputation, with your word, with the trust people place in you. Here's how that trust gets destroyed. Not all at once, gradually. The first time you say, "I'm going to do X," and don't follow through, people give you the benefit of the doubt. Well, stuff happens, I'm sure he had his reasons. The second time, they start to hesitate. Again with the plan that went nowhere. By the third, fourth, fifth time, doubt turns into certainty. Oh yeah, we know how he is. He talks a lot but never follows through. And once that certainty is locked in, it's nearly impossible to undo. Because people stop truly listening. When you announce your next plan, they nod politely, but in their heads they're thinking, "Sure, whatever you say." You've trained your environment not to take you seriously, and you did it all by yourself, with your own empty words. But the external damage is only half the problem. The internal damage is worse, because your brain is tracking that pattern too. Every time you say, "I'm going to do this," and then don't, you're reinforcing a devastating subconscious belief. I can't trust myself. And that belief seeps into everything, every decision you make, every plan you build, every moment when you need to count on your own ability to follow through. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do each thing as if it were the last thing you were going to do in your life." Notice he didn't say, "Promise each thing like it's the most important." He said, "Do." Because the Stoics understood something fundamental, that there's a huge distance between intention and action. And that distance is crossed in silence, not with announcements. Epictetus said it even more bluntly. It's not words that elevate a man, it's actions. And when we think about that in the context of what you're going to do, the wisdom becomes clear. Because saying what you're going to do doesn't lift you up. On the contrary, it exposes you. It makes you vulnerable. It puts you in a position where you either deliver or lose credibility. And if your pattern is not delivering, you're systematically choosing to destroy your own word. Let me give you a very specific example of how this plays out in real life. Imagine you work at a company. In a team meeting, you say, "I'll have the report ready by Monday." It's Tuesday. Monday comes. No report. You send a message. "Sorry, I need 2 more days." Wednesday comes. Still nothing. "Just 1 more day, I promise." This dynamic repeats across several projects for months. What's really happening? You're not just turning things in late. You're teaching your team, your manager, your co-workers that your word means nothing. That when you say, "It'll be ready," what you really mean is, "Maybe, if I have time, if I remember, if nothing else comes up." And eventually, when someone really needs to rely on your word for something critical, they can't. Because you've spent all your credibility on broken promises. And this doesn't just apply to work. It's the same in personal relationships. How many times have you told your partner, "I'm going to change this. I'll be more present. I'll help more at home." And how many times did that promise dissolve after 2 days? Every broken promise is a splinter in the relationship. And eventually, after enough splinters, the wood splits. Not because the original problem was huge, but because the repeated promise to fix it, followed by failure, created something worse: distrust. There's a specific psychological phenomenon here you need to understand. It's called the intention-action gap. It's the space between what you say you'll do and what you actually do. And behavioral psychology studies show that the wider that gap is, the more damage it causes to your self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to achieve things. Peter Gallwitzer, a psychologist at NYU, spent decades studying this. He discovered that when people announce their intentions publicly, they experience what he calls symbolic goal substitution. Basically, The act of saying it feels so satisfying that it reduces your drive to do the actual work. The brain already got part of the reward. It already felt validated. So why sweat now? But there's more. Not only do you reduce your motivation, you also create social pressure that often backfires. Because now people are watching, asking, "How's that thing you were going to do?" And each question is a reminder that you haven't done it, that once again you're falling short. And that pressure doesn't motivate, it paralyzes. It makes you avoid. It makes you procrastinate even more because the weight of the expectation has become unbearable. Now think of the opposite. Someone who doesn't announce anything, who just does, who, when they decide to start something, begins quietly. No big talk, no promises. And 6 months later, when they finally mention what they've been working on, they've got results in hand. Not intentions, proof. That person builds something completely different. Real credibility. Because when they speak, when they finally share something, people know it's serious, that it's not just talk, that there's substance behind it. And that credibility becomes an invaluable asset. Because in a world full of people who promise but don't deliver, someone whose word means something stands out like a lighthouse. David Goggins, who we mentioned earlier, embodies this perfectly. When he decided to transform himself from an overweight exterminator into a Navy SEAL, he didn't go around announcing it. He didn't tell everyone, "I'm going to be a SEAL." He just started doing the work. He lost the weight, built the endurance, survived Hell Week trainings. And when he finally made it, when he had that SEAL trident on his chest, then he had something to say. But it wasn't "I'm going to do this," it was "I did this." And that difference? It's everything. So what do you do with your intentions, with the plans you truly want to carry out? You keep them. You protect them. You treat them like seeds that need to stay underground before they sprout. Because if you expose them too soon, if you speak them before they take root, they wither. When you feel the urge to say, "I'm going to do X," stop. Ask yourself, do I need to say this? Or do I need to do this? If the answer is do it, then do that first. Build the evidence, prove to yourself that you can, and only then, if you want, share it. But not as a future promise, as a present fact. And here's something crucial most people misunderstand. I'm not saying you should never share your goals. I'm saying you should be extremely selective about when and with whom. There is a time to share, but that time is once you've built momentum, once you've proven to yourself that you can sustain the effort, once the basic structure is already in place. Sharing too soon is like inviting people to see a house that's just a pile of bricks. Everything is potential. Nothing is real. And opinions about potential are infinite and often destructive. But once the house has walls, a roof, a door, then people can see something real. And if you need their feedback, at least it's grounded in something concrete. Seneca had the perfect line for this. Judge a tree by its fruit, not by its leaves. Your intentions are leaves, maybe pretty, but they feed no one. Your actions are fruit, tangible, real. They can be tasted. And when you only share fruit, when you only talk about what you've already done instead of what you're going to do, you become someone whose words matter. And there's a powerful side effect. When you stop announcing what you're going to do, you free yourself from the trap of aspirational identity, that version of yourself that only exists in words, not in action. Many people live in that trap. They have a whole identity built on future intentions. I'm someone who's going to do X. I'm the type who's about to do Y. But if you take away the intentions, if you look only at what they've actually done, there's nothing there. When you work in silence, when you build without announcing, you force yourself to base your identity on what's real, on what you've already done, on who you already are, not on who you hope to be someday. And that identity, rooted in facts, is unshakable, it's solid, because it doesn't depend on future promises. It depends on present evidence. So next time you feel the urge to say, "I'm going to do this," bite your tongue, literally if you have to. and take that energy you were about to waste on the announcement and put it into the action. Because what you're going to do is one of those things you should never tell anyone. Keep it, do it. And when it's done, when it's undeniable, when it's real, then share it. But not as a promise, as a result. That's the only kind of speaking that builds your credibility instead of tearing it down. Lesson 4. The toxic story you tell yourself. There's a story you tell yourself every day. You don't share it with anyone. It lives only in your head. But it's more powerful than any conversation you'll ever have with someone else. Because that story determines everything. How you interpret what happens to you, how you react to problems, how you see yourself, what you believe you deserve, and what you think you can achieve. And for most people, that story is toxic. It's built on lies repeated so many times that they feel like truths. This always happens to me because that's just how I am. I'll never change. I was born this way. I ruin everything I touch. People always leave me because something's wrong with me. These aren't just stories that describe your experience, they create it. And this is one of those things you should absolutely never tell anyone. The toxic stories you tell yourself. Because when you verbalize them, when you take them out of your head and speak them into the world, two dangerous things happen. First, you solidify them. You make them more real. You turn a fleeting thought into an official statement. And second, you give others a detailed map of how to manipulate you, how to hurt you, how to keep you small. Let me explain how these toxic stories work. They don't appear out of nowhere. They're built slowly. A negative experience here, a biased interpretation there, a hurtful comment you internalized, and your brain, which is designed to find patterns, starts connecting the dots. It creates a narrative. That happened because I'm X. This keeps happening because I'm always Y. And once that narrative is locked in, something insidious happens. You start searching for evidence to confirm it. It's called confirmation bias. Your brain filters reality to find proof that supports your toxic story. If your story is, "No one respects me," you'll notice every interaction where you felt disrespected. You'll ignore or downplay the 100 other moments where people did respect you, because they don't fit the story. And worse, you start behaving in ways that make the story true. If your story is, "I always fail in relationships," you'll sabotage every relationship unconsciously. You'll look for problems where there are none. You'll misinterpret harmless actions as rejection. You'll constantly test your partner. And eventually, the relationship falls apart. Not because you were destined to fail, but because you acted from a story that predicted failure and turned it into a self-fulfilling prophecy. Marcus Aurelius wrote something painfully accurate. Life is what your thoughts make of it. It's not what happens to you. It's the story you build around what happens to you. And if that story is toxic, your life will reflect that toxicity. Not because the world is against you, but because you're interpreting the world through a poisoned lens. Epictetus put it even more directly. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. Your toxic stories are views, interpretations, not facts, but you treat them like facts, and that's how you stay trapped. Let me give you some specific examples of common toxic stories and how they work. I'm never enough. This story turns every achievement into something temporary, every compliment into something you didn't really deserve, every failure into confirmation that you're fundamentally lacking. You work twice as hard as everyone else trying to make up for the flaw you think you have. And when you succeed, when you finally reach something meaningful, the story whispers, "It was just luck. Next time they'll figure out the truth." So you never rest, you never celebrate. You're never at peace, because the story of not enough has no ending. There's always another mountain to climb to prove your worth. And when you reach the top, the story has already picked the next peak. People always let me down. This story turns you into a walking disappointment detector. Someone arrives 10 minutes late, disappointment. Someone forgets your birthday, Proof that you don't matter. Someone seems distracted while you're talking, a sign they don't value you. The story filters out thousands of moments where people did show up for you, where they did value you, where they did follow through. But those don't count, they don't fit the narrative, and eventually the people in your life get tired of every mistake being blown out of proportion, tired of every shortcoming being used as evidence that they don't care, and they walk away. Not because they were bad people, but because dealing with someone who's already decided you'll disappoint them is exhausting. And just like that, your story comes true. People let you down because you pushed them to do it. I'm a victim of my circumstances. This might be the most destructive story of all, because it steals your agency. It turns every problem into something external, every failure into someone else's fault, every obstacle into proof that the world is against you. You didn't get the job because the system is rigged. You didn't move forward because you were born in the wrong place. You don't have healthy relationships because everyone else is broken. This story never lets you look inward. It never lets you ask, what can I change? Because in this version, you have no power. Everything happens to you. Nothing is created by you. And that's how you live, reactive, bitter, waiting for life to change while refusing to change yourself. Here's the deadly danger of speaking these stories out loud. When they live in your mind, there's still a chance to question them, to analyze them, to wonder if maybe they're not true. But once you say them out loud, once you share them with others, two things happen. First, your brain registers them as more true, because speaking something requires more cognitive commitment than just thinking it. It's like signing a contract. You're making the story official. You're saying, this is what I believe about myself. And once you do that, it becomes much harder to change the story later. Second, other people start to see you through that story. If you constantly tell them you're a victim of your circumstances, they start treating you like one. They offer you pity instead of challenge. They give you excuses instead of responsibility. And without realizing it, they become accomplices in keeping that story alive. Because every time they feel sorry for you, they're validating your narrative. They're saying, yes, you're right. You are a victim. Poor you. And this creates an addictive cycle. Because there's something perversely comforting about being the victim. It frees you from responsibility. It earns you sympathy. It gives you something to blame when things go wrong. But it condemns you to a life where you never have power, where you're always at the mercy of outside forces. The Stoics understood this perfectly. Seneca wrote, "It's not because things are difficult that we don't dare. It's because we don't dare that things are difficult." The story you tell yourself about why things are hard determines whether you'll even try. And if your story is that things are hard because the world is unfair, because you're broken, because you always get the short end of the stick, then you won't dare. Because the story has already decided how it ends. But if you change the story, if instead of, I'm a victim, you say, I have challenges I can face. If instead of, I'm never enough, you say, I'm growing. If instead of, people always disappoint me, you say, relationships are complex and require work from both sides, then your whole experience of life shifts. Not because life changed, but because your interpretation did. So if you carry toxic stories, if your mind is full of destructive narratives about who you are and why your life is the way it is, don't share them. Don't validate them by speaking them out loud. Work on them internally, question them, break them apart. Ask yourself, is this a fact or an interpretation? Is there evidence that contradicts this story? What would change if this story wasn't true? And start building new stories. Stories that empower you instead of limiting you. Stories based on real evidence, not distorted interpretations. Stories that acknowledge your challenges but also your ability to overcome them. Because the stories you tell yourself shape the life you live. And if those stories are toxic, your life will reflect that toxicity. But if you change the story, you change your life. It's that simple, and that difficult, but absolutely possible. The toxic stories you tell yourself are one of those things you should never share with anyone. Keep them, examine them, destroy the ones that don't serve you, and build new ones that do. Because your life isn't what happened to you. It's the story you tell yourself about what happened to you. And that story is up to you. Then come the complaints about work, the impossible project, the unbearable client, the incompetent boss, the broken system. Then it shifts to personal life, the partner who doesn't understand them, the kids who won't listen, the noisy neighbors, the dramatic family. What happens after months of this pattern? Simple, people start actively avoiding them. They're not invited for coffee. Colleagues find excuses to skip lunch. When they see them approaching, suddenly everyone has something urgent to do. Not because people are cruel, because emotional self-preservation is basic instinct. Nobody wants to be the garbage bin where someone dumps their daily toxicity. And here comes the vicious cycle. That person, noticing they're being avoided, what do? Complain even more. Nobody talks to me. Everyone ignores me. This office is awful. People are so fake. Never once stopping to realize that their own behavior caused the isolation. They've created their own self-fulfilling prophecy, and instead of changing the pattern, they reinforce it by complaining about the consequences. But the damage goes far beyond social relationships. There's fascinating and terrifying neuroscience on this. A study from Stanford University found that exposure to 30 minutes of complaining can physically damage the hippocampus. The neurons responsible for problem-solving and cognitive function begin to deteriorate. And this applies both to the person who's complaining and to the one being forced to listen. Another study measured cortisol levels in chronic complainers. The results were alarming. Consistently elevated levels which lead to everything from weight gain, high blood pressure and heart disease to depression, anxiety, and a weakened immune system. You're literally making yourself sick with your own words. Chronic complaining isn't just a bad social habit. It's biological self-destruction. And here's something very few people realize. Complaining doesn't solve anything. Ever. 0 times in human history. Because complaining is fundamentally passive. It's a way of pointing at a problem while explicitly refusing to take responsibility for solving it. It's saying, "This sucks," without ever saying, "And here's what I'm going to do about it." It's verbalized victimhood. It's surrendering your agency and blaming outside factors for your misery. The Stoics despised this with intensity. To them, there were only 2 options. Act to change what's wrong, or accept what you can't change. Seneca put it bluntly, "It's not that we have little time, but that we waste a great deal." Now think about how much time is wasted on complaining. Hours every day, days each month, years of your life potentially. Time you could use to improve your situation, spent describing to others how bad it is instead. And there's a particularly destructive side effect. You lose credibility when something genuinely serious happens. It's the boy who cried wolf. When everything is terrible, when you're always in crisis, when every inconvenience becomes a catastrophe, people stop taking you seriously. They become numb to your drama. And the day you really need support, when something truly difficult happens, no one responds. Oh, another one of their crises, they think. And they move on. I've seen this destroy romantic relationships specifically. One partner who constantly complains about everything burns out the other's empathy. Think of it like an emotional bank account. Every complaint is a withdrawal. And when something serious finally happens, something that truly needs deep support, the account is empty. Spent on thousands of minor complaints about traffic, the weather, work, neighbors, the in-laws. There's nothing left when it matters most. So let me be clear. If you're genuinely going through something difficult, if you have real problems that need to be processed, I'm not saying to pretend everything is fine. I'm saying, be strategic. Learn the difference between useful communication and toxic dumping. Ask yourself, is this a complaint or is it communication? Are you sharing because you need real help, honest perspective, concrete support? Or are you just offloading frustration with no intention of doing anything about it? If it's the latter, don't do it. Process it internally, write it down. But don't use other people as receptacles for your daily negativity. Turn complaint into request or action. Instead of "traffic was awful," ask what you'll do differently tomorrow. Instead of "my boss is impossible," develop a strategy to communicate better. Shift from passive victim to active agent, because that shift in language reflects a shift in mindset, and that shift is what actually changes your life. And here's something Marcus Aurelius understood perfectly. Stop complaining about things you're not going to change. If you hate your job but you're not going to quit or do anything to improve it, accept that you're choosing to stay, and stop poisoning everyone else with your resentment. If you dislike your city but you're not going to move, accept it and find the beauty in what's around you. Because complaint without action is pure cowardice. It's wanting the benefits of change without paying the price. Marcus Aurelius said it with sharp, logical clarity. If something is within your power, why complain? Act. If it's not within your power, what good is complaining? It's flawless logic, and it completely destroys the justification for chronic complaining. Either you can do something, in which case, do it, or you can't, in which case, accept it. Complaining is the coward's space in between. It's where miserable people live. And every time you verbalize that misery, every time you share it, you're inviting others into that space with you. Your constant complaints are definitely one of those things you should never tell anyone, because they make you toxic. The kind of person quality people avoid. The kind of person whose presence subtracts instead of adds. And if you want meaningful relationships, if you want valuable people to stay in your life, you need to be someone who contributes. And you can't contribute if all you do is pollute every conversation with your repetitive, purposeless negativity. Lesson 6. Your transformation needs darkness to take root. You decided to change. After years of being a certain way, something clicked. Maybe it was a crisis. Maybe a moment of clarity. Maybe you just hit your limit. But you made the decision. You were no longer going to be the same person. Something fundamental had to shift. And you started. You let go of habits that were destroying you. You began others that you knew would build you. You changed the way you think, the way you react, the way you relate to others. It's hard. It's uncomfortable. Some days you want to give up. But you keep going because something inside you knows it has to be this way. And then you feel the urge to talk about it, to share this process, to explain to people that you're changing, why you're changing, how you're changing. You want them to understand your transformation, to validate it, to support you in it. So you start talking. You tell your family, your friends, your colleagues, "I'm working on myself. I'm in a process. I'm not who I used to be." And here's one of the things you should never tell anyone: your transformation while you're still in it. Because when you expose your change before it's solid, when you share your evolution before it has deep roots, you open several doors that should stay shut. And every one of those doors can completely sabotage what you're trying to build. The first door is premature scrutiny. Once people know you're working on yourself, they start watching you differently. They look for evidence of change. And here's the problem: real change isn't linear. There are good days and bad days, moments of progress and moments of regression, days when you get it right and days when you don't. That's normal. It's part of the process. But when there's an audience, when people are waiting to see your transformation, every misstep is magnified. You make a mistake you used to make, something you're actively working on, and someone who knows about your process notices. "Weren't you working on that? I thought you said you'd changed. Looks like you're still the same." And those comments, even if they come from curiosity or concern, are pure poison, because they make you feel like you failed in public, like you've disappointed expectations. And that kind of pressure is something fragile change can't bear. Because here's something crucial: real change is delicate at the beginning. It's like a new sprout. It needs time underground before it can withstand the elements. If you expose it too soon, if you let everyone watch, comment, and judge it, you kill it. The weight of outside scrutiny crushes internal growth. The second door is unqualified opinions. When you tell people you're changing, everyone has an opinion on whether you're doing it right, on whether you're being too extreme, on whether it's even necessary. And here's the issue: most of these people are completely unqualified to give you advice. They haven't done the journey you're on. They don't understand why you need to change. They can't see what you see. Your cousin who's never worked on himself tells you you're being too intense. Your friend who's stuck in the same patterns for years says you used to be more fun. Your family, who loves you but is comfortable with the old version of you, says you don't need to change so much. And all those voices, all those opinions, create noise. Noise that pollutes your clarity, that plants doubt where there used to be certainty. Epictetus understood this perfectly. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid in external things. What he's saying is, when you're in the middle of transforming, people who don't understand what you're doing are going to judge you. And you have to be willing to endure that judgment without feeling the need to explain yourself. Because explanations dilute the process. The third door is premature identity. When you announce your change, when you say, "I'm becoming X," you're adopting an identity you haven't earned yet. You're putting on clothes that don't quite fit. And there's a subtle danger here. Your brain might feel satisfied with the aspirational identity, with being someone working on themselves, without actually doing the deep work. I've seen this countless times. People who adopt the identity of being on a journey of self-discovery or healing or evolving, and that identity becomes more important than the transformation itself. They talk constantly about their process. They document it on social media. They turn it into their personal brand. But when you look at the facts, at their real behavior, nothing has truly changed. They've only changed the language they use to describe themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote only for himself. His meditations were never meant to be published. They were his way of processing his inner life in private, of working on his character away from public eyes. And that was intentional, because he knew real change needs privacy. It needs a space where you can be brutally honest with yourself, without worrying about how the world sees you. The fourth door is relational sabotage. This one is especially sneaky. When you start to truly change, when you begin to evolve, there will be people in your life who feel threatened. Not because they're bad, but because your growth forces them to look at themselves. And if they're not changing, if they're comfortable staying stuck, your evolution becomes an uncomfortable mirror. And if you've announced your process, if you've spoken your transformation out loud, you've given them ammunition. They know exactly what you're trying to change, and consciously or not, they might sabotage it. With subtle comments, with invitations to go back to old behavior, with constant reminders of who you used to be. Remember when you were more chill? You didn't used to take this stuff so seriously. You're losing your spark. And if your transformation is still fragile, if you're still finding your footing, those words can sting. They can make you doubt yourself. They can make you slip back. Because part of you still wants to belong, still wants their approval. And they're using your need for belonging against your need for growth. Seneca warned about this 2,000 years ago. Mixing with people who don't share your values will make you backslide. And when you're in transformation, when you're building new values, exposing yourself to the judgment of those still living by the old ones is dangerous. The fifth door is performance over substance. When there's an audience for your transformation, a subtle temptation arises to perform change instead of living it, to do things that look like growth, to say things that sound like evolution, to adopt the outer signs of transformation without doing the inner work. It's easier to meditate publicly than to confront your shadows privately. Easier to post inspiring quotes than to unlearn deep-rooted patterns. Easier to talk about healing than to actually heal. And when people are watching, when you feel observed, the temptation to perform multiplies. So, what do you do when you're in the middle of transforming? Because I'm not saying you should never share. I'm saying, protect your process until it's solid enough to withstand the outside world. Work in silence. Do the work when no one's looking. Change your patterns in private. Face your shadows without an audience. Build your new self the way a carpenter builds a masterpiece, in the privacy of his workshop, far from curious eyes that don't understand the process. If you need support, be extremely selective. 1 or 2 people at most. People who've done their own inner work, who understand that real change isn't linear, who can hold space for your process without judging it. But don't make it public. Don't turn it into casual conversation. Wait until you have solid evidence. Don't announce that you're changing. Change. And when the change is so undeniable that people notice without you saying a word, then you can share. But not as a process, as a result. And when you finally do share, do it from a place of solidity. Not from a need for validation. Not from, look at what I'm doing. From, this is what I did, and here's how I did it. Because then your words carry weight. They have credibility. They hold real value for those seeking their own growth. Your transformation is sacred, it's yours, and it deserves to be protected from the eyes, opinions, and judgments of those who aren't on the same path. Guard it, honor it with your silence, and let the results speak when you're ready. This is one of those things you should definitely never tell anyone until it's undeniable. Lesson 7. Your goals. Keep them to yourself until you've started working on them. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You decide you're going to change something big in your life. You're going to start working out. You're going to learn a new language. You're finally going to launch that business, write that book, and you're excited, really excited. It feels like one of those decisions that could change your life. And then, almost without realizing it, you start talking about it. You tell your best friend, you bring it up at a family dinner, you mention it at work. Maybe you even post about it on social media, a motivational caption, an inspiring photo. And while you're talking, while you're describing in detail what you're going to achieve, something happens inside you. You feel amazing, motivated, almost euphoric. People react well, they cheer you on. They say, "That's awesome. You've got this. Keep me posted." You walk away feeling like you've already taken the first step. Like just saying it out loud has put you on the path. But here's the problem. The brutal truth most people don't see until it's too late. You haven't done anything yet. You've only said it, and your brain, that brilliant but sometimes deceitful organ, can't always tell the difference between talking about doing something and actually doing it. There are neuroscience studies that prove it. When you verbalize your goals, when you talk about your plans, your brain activates the same reward circuits as if you'd already achieved them. Dopamine, endorphins, serotonin, that chemical cocktail that makes you feel satisfied, successful, accomplished. And that's where things go wrong. Because if your brain already got the reward, why bother doing the work? If you've already felt the joy of achieving it, why sweat for it? If you've already been applauded for the intention, what's the point of execution? It's like eating dessert before dinner. You're not hungry for the thing that actually matters. Derek Sivers, an entrepreneur who sold his company for $22 million and later devoted himself to studying human behavior, gave a TED Talk that nails this. He explains that when you share your goals, especially with people who respond positively, your mind experiences what psychologists call a social reality. Basically, your brain thinks you've already made progress, that you've already taken a meaningful step, and that makes you relax. It kills the urgency. It drains that raw hunger you need to start something hard. Because starting something hard requires tension, that uncomfortable push between where you are and where you want to be. But when you share your goal, when you get that external validation, the tension disappears, and so does the motivation. It's like opening a pressure valve. The pressure you needed to move forward escapes in the form of words. Imagine you've got a balloon full of air. That air is your energy, your momentum, your drive. Every time you talk about your goal, you poke a little hole in the balloon. Psst, a bit of air escapes, and if you talk too much, if you share it with too many people, if you keep updating everyone on what you're going to do, the balloon ends up empty. You've lost the drive. You've spent all that energy on words instead of actions. The Stoics understood this at a visceral level. Marcus Aurelius, writing only for himself, never imagining anyone else would read his words, said, "Don't boast about what you're going to do. Show it through your actions. Don't say you're going to be disciplined. Be disciplined. Don't announce that you're going to improve. Improve. Because words are cheap. Anyone can say they're going to do something. But action repeated day after day when no one is watching, that's what counts. And here's something else you need to understand about this thing you should never share. Your goals before you've worked on them. Because every time you speak them out loud, you don't just lose motivation. You open the door to something worse. Other people's opinions. Because people always have opinions. And many of those opinions come from their own fears, their own insecurities, their own failures. You announce you're starting a business. Your brother-in-law, who tried once and failed, tells you it's too risky. Your friend who's never dared to try anything asks if you're sure. Your mom, who loves you but wants to protect you, reminds you of all the obstacles. And even if they mean well, even if they genuinely care, their words plant doubts where there used to be clarity. They infect your vision with their fears. But if you say nothing, if you work in silence, they have no access. They can't comment on something they don't know. And you can move forward without the weight of other people's expectations, without having to defend your dream to people who don't even understand why it matters to you. There's a fascinating story about Stephen King. When he started writing Carrie, his first published novel, he was working as a high school teacher, barely scraping by. He wrote at night in a tiny trailer, with 2 little kids crying nearby. And he didn't tell many people what he was doing. His wife knew, of course, but he didn't go around announcing he was writing a novel. He didn't update his coworkers about how many pages he'd written. He just wrote, quietly, privately. And when it was done, when he had something real, he shared it. He sent it to publishers, and it changed his life. But he did the work first, not the talking. Can you imagine if he'd done the opposite? If every week in the teacher's lounge he'd said, "I'm writing a book about a girl with telekinetic powers." People would have smiled politely. Some might have made sarcastic comments. Others would have offered unsolicited advice. And all that energy he needed to write would have been wasted justifying, explaining, and defending his project. That's what I want you to understand. When you keep your goals to yourself, when you don't announce them, when you work on them privately, you're doing 2 powerful things. First, you keep all your energy focused on execution. You don't waste it on conversations that don't move you forward. And second, you protect yourself from the external noise, the doubts, the unsolicited opinions, the voices you don't need. Researcher Peter Gallwitzer at NYU ran some fascinating experiments on this. He split people into 2 groups. Both groups were working on important personal goals. One group was told to share those goals publicly, to announce them, to talk about them. The other group was told to keep them completely private. The result? The group that kept their goals to themselves worked significantly harder. They spent more hours. They pushed through when things got hard. And they made more measurable progress. The group that shared their goals, on the other hand, experienced what Gallwitzer called symbolic substitution. Basically, they felt like they had already made progress just by saying the goal out loud. That false sense of achievement drained their real motivation to take action. It's brutal when you think about it. They sabotage themselves with their own words. And it's not just the motivation that disappears. Something else happens, something just as damaging. When you announce a goal, you create public accountability. You're no longer working for you. You're working to avoid embarrassment, to avoid failure in front of others, to avoid disappointing the people who cheered you on. And that kind of motivation, the kind based on fear of judgment, is weak. It fades fast, because it doesn't come from a real place. Real motivation, the kind that lasts, that carries you through the hard days, comes from within. It's the fire that burns because something inside you knows it needs to happen. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, not because you have anything to prove, simply because it matters to you. And that kind of motivation grows best in silence, far from the applause and far from other people's doubts. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave before earning his freedom and becoming a philosopher, knew what it meant to work in silence. He said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid in external things." What he meant was, if you're working on something that matters, if you're chasing a real goal, there will be people who don't get it, who think you're wasting your time, who judge you, and you have to be willing to endure that judgment without explaining yourself. Because explanations drain energy you need to execute. So what do you do with all this? How do you apply it in real life when every part of you wants to share that exciting new goal? First, learn to recognize the difference between sharing from fullness and sharing from need. If you've already been working on something for months, if you have real progress, real results, then sharing can be powerful. It can inspire others. It can create healthy accountability. But if you're sharing from day one, if you're announcing something you haven't even truly started, chances are you're looking for validation. You're chasing a dopamine hit, and that will only make you weaker. Second, write your goal down, privately, on paper, in a journal, in a note on your phone. Make it clear and specific for you, but don't turn it into a public announcement. Writing it helps you clarify it. Keeping it private protects it. Third, find one confidant. I'm not saying never share your goals with anyone, I'm saying be extremely selective. One person, maybe two. People who've proven they truly support you, who don't project their fears onto you, who can encourage you without taking away your responsibility to do the work. Those people exist, but they're rare. They deserve to know your goals. The rest of the world doesn't. Fourth, and this is everything, measure your progress in actions, not words. Instead of saying, "I'm going to write a book," write 10 pages. Instead of saying, "I'm getting in shape," work out 5 days in a row. Instead of proclaiming, "I'm learning French," complete your first week of study. And once you've done that, once you have real evidence you're moving forward, then you can decide whether or not to share it. But only from a place of, "Here's what I'm doing," not, "Here's what I'm planning." Seneca wrote something that fits perfectly here. While we are postponing, life speeds by. And often, announcing our goals is a sophisticated form of procrastination. It's a way of feeling like we're doing something, when really we're avoiding the hard, uncomfortable beginning, because starting is tough. It forces you to face your own inexperience, your awkward first attempts, the possibility of failure. Talking is easier than doing, and that's what ties directly to the title of this video. The things you should never tell anyone. Your goals, before you've done the work, are one of the most important. Because when you share them too early, you don't just lose motivation, you give away your power. You give others permission to doubt, to comment, to distract, and your path is yours. No one else has to walk it. No one else has to approve of it. So next time you have a goal that matters, one that could truly change your life, keep it to yourself. Write it down, think about it, plan it, but don't announce it. Don't turn it into content. Don't chase applause before you've done the work. Just get to work, quietly, privately, and let your actions speak when you're ready. Because the goals that get accomplished are the ones that get worked on, not the ones that get announced. And you didn't come here to impress. You came here to deliver. Lesson 8. What you think of others can destroy you. Picture this. You're with a group of friends. The conversation is flowing, laughs, stories, memories. Then someone brings up a person who isn't there. Maybe it's a mutual acquaintance, a coworker, a family member, and the tone shifts. I always thought he was kind of fake. She's never really sat right with me. Did you see what she did the other day? So typical. And you feel the temptation. You've got your own opinion about this person, Cam, and it's not exactly flattering. Maybe they annoyed you. Maybe you just don't click. And the words are right there at the edge of your throat, ready to come out. Stop. Right. There. Because what you're about to say is one of those things you should never tell anyone. Your opinion of others, especially when it's negative, and especially when they're not there to defend themselves. Because once those words leave your mouth, they're no longer yours. They take on a life of their own, and they will come back to you in ways you can't predict. Here's the problem. We live in a world where nothing stays private for long. Conversations that feel casual can find their way into the wrong ears. That friend you trusted today might be a stranger or an enemy tomorrow, and the opinions you shared, thinking they'd stay between you, can be used against you. Passed along, repeated, misquoted, and before you know it, they've reached the person you were talking about. Now you've got drama, tension, a situation you never needed. But even if your words never reach them, something deeper happens. Something more subtle, but just as damaging. When you talk badly about others, the people around you are learning something. They're watching, they're thinking, if you talk like this about them, what do you say about me when I'm not here? Marcus Aurelius said it simply and powerfully. What harms the hive harms the bee. What hurts others hurts you, because we're all connected. And how you treat people, how you speak about them, says everything about you. It doesn't define them, it defines you. And here's something most people forget. Your opinion is based on limited information. A few moments, a handful of interactions. You don't have the full story. You don't know what battles they're fighting. You don't know what shaped them. You don't understand their context. So judging from that narrow view, that's not clarity. That's arrogance, dangerous arrogance. And even more, people change. The person you have a negative opinion about today might be completely different 6 months from now. They might grow, heal, learn. But if you've already spoken your judgment out loud, you're stuck. Stuck with a version of them that no longer exists. And if you have to work with them again or reconnect in any way, you'll have to deal with your own words, the image you painted, the poison you already released. Epictetus taught his students something powerful. When you hear someone has been accused, do not defend or condemn until you know the whole story. And I'd add, even when you do know the whole story, think twice before you speak your judgment out loud. Because not everything you think needs to be said. Not every opinion is worth sharing. Let me tell you a real-world story. I know someone who worked at a company where they clashed with a colleague. Nothing dramatic, just personality differences, work-style clashes. Over time, in casual conversations with other co-workers, they started making small comments about that person. Nothing explosive, just little jabs. Hard to work with. Not as sharp as people think. It felt harmless. Years later, this person was in the final rounds for a dream job at another company. Guess who was on the hiring committee? That same colleague. And yes, they'd heard the comments, the casual criticisms, the things that were never meant to reach them. And while that wasn't the only reason the candidate didn't get the job, it definitely played a role. All because they couldn't keep their opinions to themselves. Here's the lesson. The world is smaller than you think. Industries are small. Social circles overlap. You will cross paths with people again. You don't know who's connected to whom. And if you've left behind a trail of careless words, it can, and often does, come back to bite you. But beyond the practical consequences, this is about something deeper. The kind of person you want to be. Because when you constantly criticize, when your conversations are filled with judgment and gossip, you're training your mind to focus on the negative. You're programming yourself to see flaws, to assume the worst, and that makes you bitter, cynical, hard to be around. There are people who are known for being judgmental, always ready to tear someone down. And yes, they may have a group of friends, but they're still lonely. Because no one really trusts them. No one opens up around them. Because everyone knows, if they talk like this about others, they'll talk like that about me. And here's what most people don't realize. When you share a negative opinion about someone, You're creating a temporary alliance based on shared dislike. We both don't like this person, and cool, let's bond over it. But those alliances, they're weak, fragile. They fall apart fast because they're built on negativity, not respect, not values, not character, just gossip. And gossip doesn't build anything that lasts. Seneca put it simply, if you wish to be loved, love. I'd take it further. If you wish to be respected, show respect. Even to people you don't like, even to those you don't connect with. Because respect isn't something you give based on how someone makes you feel. It's something you give because it reflects who you are, your values, your integrity. So what do you do when you have a strong opinion about someone? When they've annoyed you? When someone asks what you think? Start with this. Is your opinion useful? Will saying it help solve anything? Will it improve the situation? Will it help anyone grow? If the answer is no, if it's just a vent, a moment of frustration, keep it to yourself. Journal it. Process it. But don't turn it into conversation. Second, if you have a real problem with someone, something that actually needs to be resolved, speak to them, not to others. Don't gather allies, don't build a case behind their back. Be direct. Hey, something's been bothering me. Can we talk about it? That's maturity. That's integrity. Talking about people to everyone except them? That's cowardice. Third, train your mind to see the good. When you notice yourself judging someone, pause. Look for something good in them, something you respect, even if it's small. This isn't about being naive. It's about balance, about protecting your mindset, about not becoming someone who only sees flaws. Fourth, when others are gossiping, don't join in. You don't need to scold them. You don't need to defend the person. Just don't add your voice to the noise. Change the subject. Ask a new question. Or stay silent. Your silence in moments like that says more about your character than any clever comeback ever could. And finally, remember this. How you talk about others reveals more about you than it ever does about them. If you're always judging, always criticizing, always pointing out flaws, people will see that as insecurity, as a need to feel superior by tearing others down. And that doesn't earn respect, it earns distance. Marcus Aurelius, who dealt with betrayal, corruption, and backstabbing daily, wrote something beautiful in the middle of all that. The best revenge is to not be like them. Don't become what you criticize. Don't adopt the behaviors you despise in others. Keep your standards. Keep your integrity, even when others don't. So next time you feel the urge to share a strong opinion about someone, especially a negative one, hold it back. Not because they necessarily deserve it, but because you deserve peace. You deserve to avoid unnecessary conflict. You deserve to be someone others can trust. Someone who doesn't speak behind backs. Someone whose words carry weight because they are chosen carefully. Your opinions about others are one of those things you should never tell anyone lightly, because at the end of the day, they don't just shape how people see them. They shape who you become, and trust me, the respect you gain by staying silent is worth far more than the fleeting pleasure of voicing a judgment. Lesson 9. Your need for validation is something you must keep to yourself. There's something a lot of people do without even realizing it, and it slowly weakens them. They share every achievement, every small win, hoping someone will tell them they're doing a good job. They constantly ask if they're on the right track. Seneca once wrote, "It's impossible to live happily if you're always living under the eyes of others." And he was right, because when you live for applause, your happiness never belongs to you. It's always conditional, always dependent on external things you can't control. And that's a form of slavery, maybe the most common one in the modern world. This constant need for approval, this craving for validation, is one of those things you should never expose. Because when you show it, when you let others see how much you rely on their approval, you lose power, you lose autonomy. You become someone whose emotional stability depends on the mood of others. And here's the most dangerous part. You can start confusing praise with progress. You feel good because someone congratulated you, because someone said, "You're doing great," because you got a like, a compliment, a nod. But that feeling doesn't come from actually advancing. It comes from external validation. And when that's the source of your motivation, when your satisfaction depends on other people's reactions, you're building a version of yourself that can't stand on its own. One that needs an audience to feel real. One that collapses the moment the applause stops. Think about it. You probably know someone like this. Maybe at some point you've been that person. The one who can't do anything without immediately sharing it. Posting every workout, every healthy meal, every small step toward a goal. And in the comments, they're looking at desperately and for that "good job," that "keep going," that "you inspire me." And when the validation comes, it feels amazing. But when it doesn't, when the post doesn't get the attention they expected, something breaks. The motivation drops. Confidence wavers, because the foundation wasn't internal. It was built on others. Marcus Aurelius said something that should be carved in stone. Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. And when you base your self-worth on other people's opinions, you're building your identity on sand. Because opinions change. Today they applaud you. Tomorrow they criticize you. And if your sense of worth rises and falls with those waves, you will never know peace. The Stoics understood something crucial, that external approval is a game you can't win. Because someone will always disagree. Someone will always criticize. Someone will always think you should be doing things differently. And if you try to please everyone, if you chase the approval of every person watching, you'll end up exhausted, watered down, a diluted version of yourself that nobody truly likes, not even you. Epictetus didn't sugarcoat it. If you want to improve, be prepared to look foolish in things that don't matter. What he meant was, if you depend on other people's approval, you'll never do anything truly meaningful. Because meaningful things often go against the grain. They require you to take risks, to make decisions others won't understand. And if you need their approval before you act, you'll stay frozen, stuck. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I met someone who decided to completely change their life, leave a well-paying corporate job to pursue something they truly cared about. At first, they told everyone, friends, family, co-workers, hoping for support, hoping to hear, "That's brave, you're doing the right thing." But instead they got doubt, questions. "Are you sure? Isn't that risky? What if it doesn't work?" And all that negativity almost stopped them, because they'd made the mistake of seeking external validation for a decision that only they had the power to make. Luckily, they realized it in time. They stopped sharing, stopped looking for approval, and they moved forward quietly. Years later, when the results were undeniable, they shared their story. But by then, they didn't need validation. They already knew they made the right call, because they had lived it. They had earned it. That's the difference between doing something for you and doing something to impress others. When you're doing it for yourself, you don't need to tell everyone. You don't need anyone to say, "You're on the right path." You know it, you feel it. And that kind of inner certainty is infinitely more powerful than any compliment from the outside. And here's the deeper reason why your need for validation must stay hidden. When you show it, when people can see how much their approval matters to you, you give them power. Because now they know how to control your emotions. Just by giving or withholding their praise, they can steer your confidence. And some people, consciously or not, will use that power. They'll manipulate you with it. I've seen it happen again and again. Someone who constantly seeks validation ends up surrounded by people who use that need to control them. If you do this, I support you. If you don't, I'm disappointed. And that person, desperate to keep the approval, ends up making choices they don't even want. Living a life that isn't theirs, all because they couldn't bear the idea of disappointing someone else. Look around you. Social media has turned validation seeking into a competitive sport. People document every moment of their lives chasing likes, measuring their worth in followers, feeling good or bad depending on how much attention each post gets. And many of them don't even realize what they're doing. They think they're just sharing, but really they're begging for approval. And when that approval doesn't come, when a post underperforms, the anxiety creeps in. What did I do wrong? Why didn't they like it? Should I delete it? It's exhausting, an emotional roller coaster where you're not even the one in control. Anyone can make you feel amazing or worthless with a single click. But there's another way to live, a way the Stoics practiced 2,000 years ago and which still works today. Living from your own center, from your own values, doing things because you know they're right, meaningful, valuable, without needing anyone to clap, without begging for recognition. Marcus Aurelius was emperor of Rome. He had absolute power. He could have surrounded himself with people praising him constantly, but he didn't. His personal writings, the Meditations, are full of self-criticism, deep questions, humble reflections. Because he didn't live to impress, he lived to improve. And that makes all the difference. So how do you stop needing validation? How do you build that inner strength to keep moving forward without someone patting you on the back? Start by noticing when you're doing it. That moment when you finish something, and your first instinct is to tell someone. Ask yourself, am I sharing this because I'm genuinely excited? Or because I need someone to tell me I did a good job? If it's the second, stop, don't share. Sit with the discomfort of not getting external validation. And you'll learn something powerful. You can survive without it. You can feel proud without applause. Learn to celebrate in private. When you achieve something that took effort, take a moment to own it. Recognize it. Be proud of yourself. But don't rush to tell the world. Hold it close. Enjoy the satisfaction of knowing you did it, whether anyone else knows or not. And when you feel tempted to do something just to impress, stop. Ask yourself, would I still do this if no one ever knew? If I could never talk about it, never post about it, never get likes or compliments, would I still choose this? If the answer is no, then don't do it, because your motive is wrong. You're living for the audience, not for yourself. There's something deeply liberating about not needing anyone's approval. About doing things because you say they matter. About having your own internal standards and living by them, no matter what others think. That's real freedom. Not doing whatever you want whenever you want, but being who you are without needing permission. And yes, it's hard at first. We're trained from childhood to seek approval, from parents, from teachers, from friends. That habit runs deep, but it can be unlearned. You can rewire your mind, learn to validate yourself, to be your own judge, your own standard, your own source of strength. When you do that, when you no longer need people to tell you you're on the right path, something changes. You become more real, more authentic. Because you're no longer performing, you're just being yourself. No filters, no masks, no need to please. And paradoxically, when you stop chasing validation, you gain more respect. Because people feel that solidity, that integrity, that unshakable sense of self. People who need applause are easy to manipulate, easy to predict. Weak, because their emotional state is tied to things outside their control. But people who are centered in themselves, they're strong, steady, trustworthy, because no matter what happens around them, they stay grounded. So next time you feel that urgent need to share something just to get validation, pause, breathe, and ask yourself if you really need someone to tell you it was good. Because if you do, if you can't feel proud without that external confirmation, then you've got work to do. You need to build that inner foundation, that strength that allows you to be your own source of approval. Your need for validation is one of those things you should never share. Because when you expose it, you strengthen it. You give it power, and you become dependent on something you can't control. But when you keep it to yourself, when you work through it privately, when you learn to validate yourself, you become free. And that freedom, my friend, is one of the most valuable things you will ever earn in this life. Lesson 10. Some forms of intimacy are protected by keeping them private. My friend, listen closely. Not everything that shines is gold, and not every smile is sincere. There's something life teaches you, sometimes the hard way. Not everyone who gets close to you deserves to know what's inside you. Not everyone deserves to know what hurts you, what scares you, what keeps you up at night. Because trust is one of the most valuable gifts you can offer, but also one of the most dangerous if you give it to the wrong people. When you trust someone, when you open up about your secrets, your fears, your most vulnerable truths, you're opening a door. You're letting them into a part of yourself that's usually protected. And if that person doesn't know how to handle what they find inside, if they don't have the integrity to honor what you've shared, they can do real damage. They can use it against you. They can pass it on to others. They can belittle things that deeply matter to you. And when that happens, when someone betrays your trust, something breaks. And not everything can be fixed. Nature teaches us this again and again. Bamboo, for instance, can spend 5 years growing underground without a single shoot appearing above the surface. But during that time, it's building deep roots, strong, invisible, stable. And only after those roots are fully developed does it grow upward, fast, strong, unstoppable. That's how your intimacy should be, built in private, protected, and only shared when you're sure the ground you're planting it in is strong enough to hold it. But we live in a time where everything gets shared, where if people don't know something, it's almost like it didn't happen. A time where people document every emotion, every thought, every vulnerable moment online, thinking they're being authentic, being brave, connecting with others. But more often than not, what they're really doing is giving away their intimacy to strangers who have no responsibility or ability to care for it. Has this ever happened to you? You're with someone who seems close, someone you like, and in a moment of vulnerability, you share something personal, something that hurts, something that's hard to say out loud. And the other person listens, or at least seems to. But as soon as you finish, they respond with something like, "Oh, that's nothing. You should hear what happened to me." And before you can even process what just happened, they've hijacked the conversation, talking about their problem, their drama, their story. And you're left there with that bitter taste. You opened something important, only to have it used as a springboard for someone else's monologue. No empathy, no care, no holding space, just a subtle message. Your pain doesn't matter as much as mine. That hurts. And it should teach you something vital. Not everyone has the emotional capacity to hold space for your vulnerability. Not everyone knows what to do with the trust you give them. Some people simply don't have the tools, not necessarily out of malice, just a lack of emotional development. The Stoics knew this deeply. Epictetus taught his students to observe before opening up, to let time reveal who possesses the virtue of discretion, respect, and wisdom, not because they were cold or closed off, but because they knew this truth. Some things should only be shared with those who've earned the right to hear them, because opening your inner world to the wrong person can cause more harm than staying silent. Seneca put it bluntly, "It is safer to avoid giving trust than to regret giving it." He wasn't being paranoid. He was being realistic. He had lived through the ruthless politics of Rome, had seen secrets used as weapons. He knew that discretion is not distrust, it's intelligence. And this doesn't just apply to major secrets. It applies to anything in your inner world, your fears, your doubts, your dreams, your insecurities, your failures. All of that is your intimacy, and it deserves to be protected, to be shared only with people who have shown they can honor it. Because some people, consciously or not, will use the information you give them to feel superior. You share an insecurity, and they bring it up every chance they get. Didn't you say you were super insecure about that? You share a failure, and they use it to discredit you later. Well, you've never been great at that, and remember when? You share a dream, and they subtly mock it. Still chasing that? Don't you think it's time to be realistic? And the worst part? These people are often the ones closest to you. Family, longtime friends, partners even. People who should be your safe place, but because of their own unhealed wounds, end up using your vulnerability to assert control or superiority. So what should you do? Shut down? Trust no one? No. That's not the answer either. We need connection. We need safe spaces to be vulnerable. But it has to be with the right people. And finding them takes time. It takes observation. It takes small tests before big revelations. Watch how people handle other people's stories. If someone constantly tells you other people's secrets, they'll tell yours too. If someone gossips with you about everyone else, they'll gossip about you as well. Those are red flags, and you can't afford to ignore them. Start small. Test with something minor, something that wouldn't destroy you if it got out. Then watch. Do they respect it? Keep it private? Honor it? Or do they brush it off, make it about themselves, or casually share it with others? That little test tells you everything about whether they're ready for more. And most importantly, stop oversharing impulsively. We live in a culture of immediate unloading. Something happens and we feel the need to tell someone, right now. But often, what you need isn't to say it. What you need is to sit with it. Let the emotion settle. Process it internally before handing it over to someone else. Because when you share things too quickly, unfiltered, unprocessed, and without care, you're handing over your intimacy without protection, and that's dangerous. It's like walking outside naked. Sure, it might feel freeing for a second, but the consequences can be brutal. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that fits perfectly here. The best revenge is to not be like your enemy. And I'd add this: the best protection is not giving your intimacy to just anyone. Because when you protect it, when you share it only with those who've earned it, you stay strong, you stay whole. You don't give anyone the power to hurt you from the inside. And here's something most people don't understand. Protecting your intimacy doesn't make you cold. It doesn't make you emotionally unavailable. It's not about building walls. It's about discernment, about knowing there are levels of intimacy, that not everyone gets to access the deepest layers. Some people can know certain parts of you, but not everything, and that's okay. In fact, it's healthy. You can be warm, kind, open, accessible, without handing over your entire inner world. You can connect with people without exposing every scar. You can have meaningful relationships without sharing every thought. And when you do find those rare people, the ones who've earned your full trust, then you open up fully. And when you do, it'll mean so much more, because it was earned, protected, respected. Let me tell you something else. When you learn to protect your intimacy, you also protect yourself from becoming the kind of person who needs to tell everything. Because some people become addicted to unloading. Every problem, every emotion, every issue becomes public, and they burn themselves out and burn out the people around them because everything is urgent. Everything needs to be talked about. Nothing stays inside. But when you learn to process things privately, to hold your own emotions without needing immediate feedback, you become stronger, more stable, more grounded. And ironically, when you do share something, it holds more weight, because you don't speak all the time. When you do, people listen. Yes, trust. Yes, open your heart. But do it like bamboo. Build deep roots first. Make sure the ground where you're planting your trust is solid. And then, when you know it can hold what matters most, grow upward. Share. Trust fully. Because those roots will hold you if things go wrong. Those roots are your discernment, your wisdom, your ability to choose well, your secrets, your intimacy, your deepest vulnerabilities. They are one of those things you should never share with just anyone, not with no one, but not with anyone, because some people do deserve to know, but they're few, and finding them takes time, observation, patience, small tests before big trust. And when you find them, when you have those rare people in your life who've proven they can honor your vulnerability, treasure them, because they're gold, rare, and they deserve for you to honor the trust they place in you too. Lesson number 11. The personal battles you're fighting are yours, not a spectacle. Not everything needs to be told. There are moments in life when the wisest, most intelligent, most strategic thing you can do is to remain silent, and not out of fear, nor out of shame nor weakness, but for something much deeper. Because there are battles that are only won when no one is watching. Internal battles that lose their strength the moment you expose them. Transformations that are weakened when you interrupt them with explanations. Think about it. You're fighting something. It might be an addiction you've been dragging for years. It might be a destructive pattern you repeat over and over again. It might be a version of yourself you want to leave behind. And you decide to face it. You decide that this time it's for real. That you're going to do the work, no matter the cost. And in that moment of clarity, of determination, of real commitment to yourself, you feel the urge to tell it, to share the process, to announce it to the world. And you do. You tell your family, your friends. You post it on social media if you're one of those. I'm working on myself. I'm in a process of change. I'm healing. And the responses come quickly. Some supportive, others doubtful. Are you sure? This again? How many times have you said the same thing? That's very difficult. I tried and it didn't work. And suddenly what was clarity becomes doubt. What was momentum becomes paralysis. Because the outside noise is drowning out the inner voice. This happens constantly. A person decides to leave a toxic relationship. They share it and they get 1,000 opinions. Give it another chance. Relationships are hard. Are you sure the problem isn't you? Someone else decides to change careers. They announce it. And everyone has something to say. At your age? What about money? That's too risky. Another person decides to work on their mental health. They share it. And people minimize the struggle. It's not that bad. We all have problems. You just need to get out more. And there lies the problem. When you expose a battle that you're still fighting, when you share a transformation that is only just beginning, you open the door for others to question it, to project their fears onto your decision, to contaminate your clarity with their doubts. And if what you're doing is still fragile, if you're just taking the first steps, that external questioning can be enough to stop you. Nature teaches us this constantly. The eagle doesn't announce its flight. It builds its nest at the highest point of the mountain in inaccessible, protected places. And when it's ready, when it has done the work of preparation, it simply flies. Without witnesses, without warnings, without asking for permission, without needing approval. That's how we should act many times, without exposing what is still taking shape, without sharing battles that need to be won in private before being told in public. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire and had to make decisions that affected millions of people, wrote only for himself, not to impress, not to explain, not to justify. He wrote to remain firm within, to remind himself of his principles when everything around him was chaos. And those writings, those meditations we now read, were completely private. He never intended to publish them. They were his internal battle, his way of processing himself, and he won them in silence. He wrote something that we should tattoo on ourselves. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. And I'll add to that, the best way to win your internal battles is not to turn them into a show. You don't need to prove that you're right. You don't need everyone to understand what you're going through. You need to act according to your truth, even if no one understands it, even if they judge you, even if they think you're wrong. Epictetus taught something similar, that first you must act, and only if necessary speak. Because when you do it the other way around, when you speak before acting, the ego gets ahead of the purpose. You get stuck in explanations, in justifications, in the need to convince others that you're doing the right thing, and all that energy you could be using to win the battle. You're wasting it defending the fact that you're fighting it. Let me tell you something I went through. There was a time in my life when I felt I needed a deep change. It wasn't something superficial. It wasn't, I'm going to exercise more, or I'll read more. It was something that touched the root of who I was, and I felt it in my gut. That certainty that doesn't come from the head, but from a deeper place. You know what I'm talking about. We've all felt that at some point. I had made the decision. It felt right. But before acting, I spoke about it. And that's when everything went off track. I said it with excitement, perhaps looking for validation, wanting someone to tell me I was doing the right thing. But what I received was fear, opinions full of projected doubt. What if it doesn't work out? What if you regret it? Isn't that too drastic? Have you thought about the consequences? And without realizing it, I caught other people's fear. I was convinced, until I listened too much, and suddenly I didn't know if I was following my own voice or someone else's, if my clarity was real or if I was missing something. The doubts I didn't have before speaking appeared afterward, and it took me months to recover that initial certainty. Months I could have used moving forward instead of justifying myself. That was the day I learned that there are battles that can only be won in silence, that there are decisions that aren't meant to be discussed, just executed, that not everything you feel should be turned into words. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is protect your direction from noise, protect your process from opinions, protect your battle from spectators. And here comes something many people don't understand. When you fight a battle in silence, when you don't share it, when you don't expose it, you're not being secretive or mysterious. You're being strategic. Because internal battles are delicate, they're complex, they're personal. And bringing them to light too soon is like pulling a plant out of the soil to see if the roots are growing. You kill it in the process. There are battles that need darkness to grow stronger. They need that time underground, like the bamboo, creating deep roots that no one sees. And only when those roots are strong enough, when the transformation is solid enough, can it come to light. Can it be shared? But not before. Also, when you share your battle while you're still fighting it, you become a hostage to other people's expectations. People start asking you, "How's that going? Have you improved? Are you still on that?" And each question is pressure. Each curious look is a weight. Each well-intentioned comment is a distraction. Because now you're no longer fighting just for yourself. You're fighting so as not to disappoint those who know, so as not to fail publicly. So you don't have to admit that you relapsed or that it's harder than you thought. And that external pressure is often enough to make you give up. Because internal battles are already hard enough without having to carry other people's judgment as well. Without having to be accountable to people who don't even understand what you're going through. Seneca wrote, "Sometimes, even living is an act of courage." And he was right. There are daily battles no one sees. Getting out of bed when depression weighs you down. Not taking that drink when the urge is overwhelming. Not sending that message when anxiety is eating you alive. Choosing silence when you want to explode. Those are real battles. Battles fought moment by moment. And they don't need an audience. They need strength. So what do you do with this? How do you apply this lesson? That the personal battles you're fighting should never be shared with just anyone. Review which battles you're sharing out of habit, impulse, or insecurity. Every time you feel the urge to talk about a struggle you're having, ask yourself, do I really need to share this or do I just need to hold it in silence a little longer? Am I sharing because it will help or because I need validation? If it's the second, keep it to yourself. Give it time. Work on it without an audience. Protect your process. Not everything you're building is ready for public opinion. There are transformations that grow better when you don't interrupt them with explanations. When you don't have to justify every step. When you can fail in private and get back up without anyone knowing. That freedom to mess up without witnesses is invaluable. Make silence your ally. Don't isolate yourself, but be selective with whom you share. There are one or two people in your life who deserve to know your battles. People who have shown that they can hold your vulnerability without judgment. With those people, yes, you can share. But with the rest, with the world in general, sometimes it's enough that you know, and that's it. Because there are battles that are won without spectators. In your mind, in your perseverance, in your ability to stay quiet about what you're creating until it has roots. In those moments at 3 a.m., when no one sees you, and you choose not to give up. in those daily decisions that no one applauds, but that are building the person you're becoming. And if you do it right, the day will come when you won't need to tell it. What you've become will speak for itself. People will notice the change without you having to explain it. They'll see that you're no longer the same, that something fundamental has shifted. And when they ask you what happened, what you did, how you managed it, then yes, you can share. From a place of strength, from a place of accomplishment, from a place where you no longer need validation, because you've already won the battle. The personal battles you're fighting are yours. They're private, they're sacred, and they deserve to be protected from noise, from judgment, from opinions that don't understand the context. Keep them to yourself, fight in silence, and win for you, not for the crowd. And finally, the 12th and last reflection. Why are you distancing yourself from the noise? Picture this. At the top of a mountain lived a monk. Every morning before the sun had fully risen, he would walk down to the village to fetch water. He wandered the streets in complete silence, carrying his clay jug. He watched people go about their day. He listened to conversations, but he never took part. He never stopped to weigh in on the town's dramas. He never got involved in the gossip that moved from house to house. He simply filled his jug and walked back up the mountain. The villagers grew used to his quiet presence. Some respected him, others found him strange. "Why is he so silent?" they would ask. "Why does he live up there all alone?" But no one ever dared to ask him directly, until one day a young man caught up with him on the path back up. "Master," he said, even though the monk had never called himself that, "why are you so quiet? You have wisdom, anyone can see that. Why don't you share it? Why don't you teach us what you know? Why don't you come join us?" The young man expected a deep reply, an elaborate explanation, maybe a lesson on the power of silence or the dangers of speech. The monk stopped, looked him straight in the eyes, and simply said, "If I still need to speak for it to show, then I don't know it well enough yet." And he kept walking up the mountain, leaving the young man with the shortest and most complete answer he could have received. That answer says it all. Sometimes noise only shows up when there's insecurity, when you need to prove something, when you need everyone to know what you're doing, when your inner peace depends on external validation. But when you're truly grounded, when you're truly at peace, when you're truly focused on what matters, you don't need to announce it. You don't need to justify it. You don't need to explain why you live the way you live. You simply live it. And this connects with the final thing you should never tell anyone: why you're stepping away from the noise, why you need silence, why you're no longer always available, why you've chosen to turn the volume down on the world. That doesn't need an explanation. You don't owe anyone a thesis on why you need peace, because we're surrounded by noise. Everywhere, all the time. Constant external noise, notifications blowing up, messages demanding immediate replies, headlines screaming urgency when nothing's really urgent, opinions fired from every screen, conversations that lead nowhere but still eat hours of your life. And also internal noise, doubts that keep you up at night, comparisons that steal your peace, constant anxiety to share everything, to validate everything, to prove you're moving forward even when you're feeling lost. Do you know how exhausting that is? Living with the volume turned up to the max all the time, feeling like you have to explain every step you take, like you have to justify every decision, like you have to announce your changes so they feel real, as if your life needed a constant narrator just to exist, as if your process didn't count unless it had an audience, as if what you do in private didn't matter. The problem is that noise can look like action. It feels like productivity. It keeps you busy. But more often than not, it's just distraction in disguise. It's movement with no direction. It's being busy all day without really moving toward anything that matters. And eventually, if you're paying attention, your soul runs out of battery. Because speaking, exposing, justifying, explaining, all of that drains you. It takes energy you could be using to build something real. And at some point, if you're lucky, you realize it. You realize you need to step away. You need to turn the volume down. You need to create space between you and all that noise around you. You need silence, not as punishment, not as escape, but as a basic form of survival, as self-care, as the only way to hear your own voice in the middle of everyone else's. But here's the catch. The moment you start pulling away, the moment you decide you won't be constantly available, that you won't respond to everything, that you won't participate in every conversation, that you won't share every thought, people notice, and they want explanations. Why aren't you on social media as much? Why don't you reply as fast as before? Are you okay? Did something happen? Are you mad at me? Did I do something wrong? And you feel the pressure to explain, to justify, to make people understand why you need that space, why you're stepping away, why the noise that you once tolerated now feels unbearable. But listen to me carefully. You don't owe them that explanation. You don't owe anyone a detailed analysis of why you need peace. You don't have to justify why silence has become more valuable than noise. You don't need to convince anyone that your decision to create distance is valid, because your peace is not up for debate. Epictetus said it with timeless clarity. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. And that fits perfectly here. You don't need to explain why you're choosing silence over noise, why you're choosing depth over superficiality, why you're choosing your mental health over the expectation of constant availability. Just do it. Live it. No apologies. Because when you start explaining, when you try to make others understand your need to step away, what usually happens is you meet resistance. People take it personally even when it has nothing to do with them. People think your need for space is a direct rejection of them. People can't grasp that stepping away from the noise isn't the same as stepping away from people. It's stepping away from a dynamic that was draining you. And you'll find people who'll try to talk you out of it. Don't overreact. We're all going through the same thing. That's just modern life. You can't isolate yourself. You're becoming antisocial, as if your need for silence was a weakness, as if needing peace was something to be ashamed of, as if the world would stop spinning if you weren't available all the time for everyone. But that's their problem, not yours, because this stepping away from the noise is deeply personal. It's a need that shows up when you've hit your limit, when you realize you've been living on autopilot, reacting to external stimuli like Pavlov's dog, responding to what others expect from you, lost in constant comparison, exhausted from pretending everything's fine when something inside is screaming that it's not. It's that moment when you decide you're no longer going to live with the phone glued to your hand, that you're not going to check social media every 5 minutes for no reason, that you're not going to be available for conversations that don't nourish you, that you're not going to keep participating in dynamics that drain your energy without giving anything in return. And that decision, that clarity that comes after so much noise, is so intimate, so personal that trying to explain it to someone who hasn't been there is almost impossible. Because to someone still comfortable in the noise, your decision to step away seems extreme. It seems unnecessary. It seems like you're being dramatic. But to you, who's reached your limit, who has seen firsthand what constant noise does to your mental health, your creativity, your ability to be present, your inner peace, it's not extreme. It's survival. It's reclaiming your life before it completely slips away. Seneca wrote 2,000 years ago, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And he was right. Most of that wasted time gets swallowed by noise. Pointless conversations that go nowhere. Online arguments with strangers about things that don't matter. Content we consume compulsively that adds nothing to our lives. Constant connection that leaves us disconnected from ourselves. And when you see that, when you see how much time, how much energy, how much life you've lost to the noise, the decision to step away isn't optional. It's urgent. It's necessary. It's the only way to recover something you nearly lost, yourself. But here's the key. When you make that decision, when you choose to step away from the noise, you don't need to make a public announcement. You don't need a dramatic post explaining why you'll be less active. You don't need to send group messages detailing your disconnection process. Just start. Just create the space. Just turn down the volume. And if someone asks, if someone truly cares and comes to you with genuine curiosity and respect, you can share something, but you don't owe anyone a full explanation just because they noticed your absence. Because often, and this is hard but true, the people who question your distance the most are the ones who benefited most from your constant availability, the ones who could count on you for anything, at any time. The ones who used your energy, your time, your attention with no real reciprocity. And now that that access is gone, now that boundaries have shown up, they feel it, and they question it, not because they care about your well-being, but because they care about what they've lost, about the fact that they can't reach you as easily anymore. And here's something you need to carve in stone. Your peace is non-negotiable. Your mental health is not up for debate. Your need for silence doesn't require anyone's approval. These are decisions you make for you, by you, and only you can determine whether they're necessary. And if they are, if you've reached the point where the noise is unsustainable, then stepping away is the right choice, whether others understand it or not, whether they approve or not. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by the constant noise of the Roman court, the endless political games, the non-stop demands of power, he found moments of silence to write, to think, to process, to stay centered. He never explained why he needed that time. He never justified his retreats. He never asked for permission to pull away from the circus around him. He just did it, because he knew that without that silence, without stepping away from the noise, he couldn't stay true to himself. So if that's where you are right now, if you're feeling that growing need to step back, if the noise is draining you and you know you need space, take it, without long explanations, without dramatic justifications, without announcements. Just start creating that space your soul is screaming for. Cut down your time on social media. Don't announce it, just do it. Delete the apps if you have to. Stop checking constantly. Stop replying instantly to every message like it's an emergency. Don't explain why you're slower to respond now. Just take your time. Leave those WhatsApp groups that add nothing to your life but constant noise. Don't over-explain. A simple, "I need space" is more than enough if you choose to say anything at all. Stop joining conversations that drain you. Those circular arguments that go nowhere. Those complaint-filled chats with no solutions. Those meetups where you leave more exhausted than when you arrived. Don't justify why you don't want to participate anymore. Just move toward what nourishes you, toward what fills you instead of emptying you. And when someone notices your absence, when they ask why you've changed, why you're not as available, don't feel obligated to give a full explanation. A simple, "I'm taking time for myself" is enough. It's complete, it's honest. And if they push, if they demand more, if they can't accept that boundary, if they need you to justify your need for peace, that says more about them than it does about you. Because the ones who truly care about you will respect your need for space without requiring a 500-page essay explaining why. The world's noise is exhausting, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and stepping away from it is not weakness, it's not being antisocial, it's not closing yourself off from the world or from relationships. It's self-care in its purest form. It's prioritizing your mental health over social expectations. It's creating the conditions you need to become the best version of yourself. And that doesn't need explanation. It doesn't need committee approval. It just needs you to decide that your peace matters more than anyone else's expectations. Like that monk on the mountain, who didn't explain why he lived in silence, who didn't justify his distance from the village, who simply did what he knew he needed to do. And his life spoke for him. His peace was obvious, his clarity was tangible, and he didn't need words to prove it. So if that's where you are, if you've reached that point, do it. Step away from the noise. Find the silence your soul is asking for. Create that sacred space where you can hear yourself again. And don't explain it to anyone. Because this, the last of the 12 things you should never tell anyone, may be the most important of all. All these reasons, all these whys, why you need peace, why you need silence, why you're stepping away from the noise, they're yours, entirely yours, deeply yours, and no one else needs to understand them for them to be valid. Your peace doesn't need an audience, it only needs your commitment. And when you choose silence over noise, you're choosing life over existence. You're choosing to be instead of to seem. And that, my friend, is the most powerful choice you can make. Sometimes it's not that the world treats you badly. It's that you handed it the instructions. Every time you opened the door too wide. Every time you gave your intimacy to someone who didn't deserve it. Every time you spoke without thinking about the cost. And you know what's the hardest part? You still do it without even realizing. If this video stirred something in you, if deep down you know you've been speaking from your wounds instead of your wisdom, subscribe and become an exclusive member. And tell me in the comments, what's something you've shared 1,000 times and each time it hurt even more? Or simply write, "My silence protects me." They say those who stay until the end always find their reward. And you just did. So I invite you to subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who might need it. Click now on the videos you see on screen, because the journey is just beginning.